I'm going to start out this video with a trigger warning. Trigger warning for mentions, but not in detail, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional and verbal abuse, talk about dissociative disorders. I would like to preface that I am not a doctor or medical professional. I am someone who has been diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. I can only speak from my experiences and speak on what information is available to me. I will be referencing articles based on American organizations because I do live in America. I was diagnosed in America, and this information is relevant to me as an American with DID. I cannot speak for other countries and systems simply because that is not my experience. There are different guidelines when it comes to mental health with each country, so I only feel comfortable referencing American articles and organizations. If you suspect you have any of these disorders that I will be talking about in this video, please try to seek professional help if possible and try not to dig too deep into your own medical issues without assistance of a professional. You can cause serious damage to yourself and re-traumatize yourself without meaning to. I wanted to make a video covering the types of dissociative disorders and their causes and what is dissociation and the treatment for those dissociative disorders. And I feel like doing a voiceover style would be better for me because not only do I have DID, I also have ADHD, which causes a lot of memory problems. I will say that I am probably going to say things wrong. This is like my third time recording this, so I am probably going to mess up some words, and it is not out of disrespect. I have a hard time pronouncing words because of my audio processing part of ADHD, so please bear with me. I know this is another voiceover, but again, I think having voiceover for informational stuff is a lot better for me because I can read off a script. So like right now, I am not reading off of a script. It just says do a little intro, so this is what I'm doing, and then I ramble, and you've all seen how I am in my just face-to-face videos. I'm all over the place. I will have an update next week about my intake. I'm actually having that done at 3 and it's 2 o'clock now, so on June 30th. So yeah, I'll have an update for you guys next week. But I hope you enjoyed this little informational video about dissociative disorders. Today I will be discussing causes of dissociative disorders, what is dissociation, what are the types of dissociative disorders, and treatment for these disorders. First off, what are the causes of dissociative disorders? The National Alliance of Mental Illness says, dissociative disorders usually develop as a way of dealing with trauma. Dissociative disorders most often form in children exposed to long-term physical, sexual, or emotional abuse. Natural disasters and combat can also cause dissociative disorders. For me personally, I'm still uncovering the abuse I went through. I didn't know I was sexually abused as a child, and when I mean a child, I mean before I was a teenager. I didn't know I was sexually abused until I was about 18 or 19 years old, even though all my therapists at the time said I was showing signs of being sexually abused as a child. The sexual abuse had stopped a month or so before I turned 17. But I was physically, verbally, and emotionally, and financially abused up until I was about 22 years old, so when I moved out 2 years ago. I was subjected to abuse not only from my parents, but others as well, from birth until I was 22 years old. I turned 25 next month, so now I am 24. So let's talk about the main symptom when you're talking about dissociative disorders, which is dissociation. The American Psychiatric Association defines dissociation as a disconnect between a person's thoughts, memories, feelings, actions, or sense of who he or she is. Dissociation is a normal process that everyone at some point has experienced. The most common experience that is talked about is when you're driving a car and when you realize you're already at your destination without realizing the amount of time that has gone by. Of course, not every time you drive a car you're going to experience dissociation, but this is just the most commonly talked about and most common experience that people can relate to. Some other examples of dissociation are daydreaming or getting lost in a good book, movie, or show, which all involve losing touch with awareness of one's immediate surroundings. In my experience, I often feel like I'm floating ever so slightly above my body, and it makes me severely uncomfortable. If you know me personally, well, even on my YouTube, I use the term floaty quite often, and it's just the best way I could describe my experience of dissociation. Before I had the word that was, describing my experience, which is dissociation, I used floaty to describe how I felt because I had no other words to put to feelings because, of course, I didn't know what the hell dissociation was. And where I have DID, severity is different, and the dissociative disorders that I'm going to be talking about are all within DID as well. So I'll get more into those experiences as we continue. So, what are the types of dissociative disorders? The American Psychiatric Association says dissociative disorders involve problems with memory, identity, emotion, perception, behavior, and sense of self. These dissociative symptoms can potentially disrupt every area of mental functioning. There are 3 types of dissociative disorders: depersonalization and derealization disorder, dissociative amnesia, and the one I'm diagnosed with, dissociative identity disorder. I did want to mention that there is OSDD-1A and OSDD-1B. These disorders do not meet the full criteria for a dissociative disorder, but it is worth mentioning because you can have a system within these diagnoses, and I know several OSDD systems. I'm not sure if I'll ever touch on OSDD. I might if I do more research, but I feel that OSDD systems that do content are more equipped to talk about OSDD rather than myself because I'm just not sure. I just don't want to step on anybody's toes. I will leave a resource for OSDD and all the other information that I have in this video in the description box. So let's get into more detail about these dissociative disorders. What is depersonalization/derealization disorder? The American Psychiatric Association states depersonalization/derealization disorder involves significant, ongoing, and reoccurring experience of one or both conditions. Depersonalization, experiences of unreality or detachment from one's mind, self, or body. People may feel as if they are outside of their bodies and watching events happening to them. Derealization is experiences of unreality or detachment from one's surroundings. People may feel as if things and people in the world around them are not real. During these altered experiences, the person is aware of reality and that their experience is unusual. The experience is very distressful, even though the person may appear to be unreactive or lacking emotion. I personally experience depersonalization more often than I do derealization. I often feel like I'm not real, and I'm often confused when I look in the mirror or when I touch my body. When I experience derealization, though, I feel like I'm in a dream almost. It's disorienting because it's hard for me to know if I actually woke up that morning. I also have sleep trouble, so it just makes things a lot worse. When I'm experiencing derealization, everything looks hazy and I feel like I don't belong to my surroundings. Now let's move on to what is dissociative amnesia. According to the American Psychiatric Association, dissociative amnesia involves not being able to recall information about oneself, not normal forgetting. This amnesia is usually related to a traumatic or stressful event. The dissociative amnesia may be localized, which is unable to remember an event or period of time, which is the most common type, selective, which is unable to remember a specific aspect of an event or some events within a period of time, and then it could be generalized, which is complete loss of identity and life history, which is rare. Dissociative amnesia is associated with having experiences of childhood trauma, and particularly with these experiences of emotional abuse and emotional neglect. People may not be aware of their memory loss or may have only limited awareness. And people may minimize the importance of memory loss about a particular event or time. A personal example of dissociative amnesia was when I told you guys that I had no idea that I was sexually abused as a child until I was 18 years old. I also have barely any memories before the time I moved out on my own 2 years ago. So basically, I really have no memories from, I guess you can say, when I was born until I was about 22 years old. Everything is very absent, and living in a constant state of flight, fight, fawn, or freeze will do that to you, especially if you are a young child being subjected to horrific abuse. So let's move on to what is dissociative identity disorder. The American Psychiatric Association says dissociative identity disorder is associated with overwhelming experiences, traumatic events, and/or abuse that occurred in childhood. Symptoms of dissociative identity disorder, criteria for diagnosis, include the existence of two or more distinct identities. The distinct identities are accompanied by changes in behavior, memory, and thinking. The signs and symptoms may be observed by others or reported by the individual. Ongoing gaps in memory about everyday events, personal information, and/or past traumatic events. The symptoms cause significant distress or problems in social, occupational, and other areas of functioning. The American Association continues to state, in addition, the disturbance must not be normal part of a broadly accepted cultural or religious practice. As noted in the DSM-5, in many cultures around the world, experiences of being possessed are a normal part of spiritual practice and are not dissociative disorders. The attitude and personal preferences, for example, about food, activities, and clothes, etc., of a person with dissociative identity disorder may suddenly shift and then shift back. The identities happen involuntarily and are unwanted and cause distress, some of the times. I'm adding that in there. People with dissociative identity disorder may feel that they have suddenly become observers of their own speech and action, or their bodies may feel different. Example, like a small child, the opposite gender, huge and muscular. With dissociative identity disorder, DID for short, you also experience dissociative amnesia and depersonalization/derealization as well. Dissociative amnesia plays a huge part in DID. When altered states of consciousness, also known as just alters, switch, also known as fronting, this causes the dissociative amnesia. That's why people with DID have such gaps in memory, because when an alter fronts, typically, the other alters have no memory, or have a vague memory of what happens. And this can be a whole video in itself, so I won't get into much detail about it in this video. When the criteria states existence of two or more distinct identities, the existence of two or more identities does include the individual seeking help. An example, that would be me, Max, the host, is considered an alter alongside the other 16 alters that I have. And us, for us personally, we use the parts language. We heavily used like my people in the language before, but it's really helped our healing to think of us as all parts of a whole. It has really helped us connect in a better way that is not so individualized. And I know that's not for every system, and I'm not telling you how to heal, but this is just the way that we chose to heal. The term alter is used now rather than personalities due to the misconception of what DID was/is, and is no longer considered a personality disorder. The name of this disorder was changed in 1994 to better reflect the condition, so that's almost 30 years ago now. There are different types of alters and alter roles, and again, this could be a separate video. Each alter doesn't need to know their role for a system, for their system to be valid as well. I would like to say that DID is just not about the alters. It's not an alter disorder. Each part in my system suffers to a degree with the trauma we went through, so they also have PTSD symptoms. The American Psychiatric Association defines PTSD as a psychiatric disorder that can occur in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event such as a natural disaster, a serious accident, a terrorist attack, war/combat, or rape, or who have been threatened with death, sexual violence, or serious injury. Some PTSD symptoms, according to the National Institute of Mental Health, include flashbacks, which is reliving the traumatic event, including physical symptoms such as a racing heart or sweating, reoccurring memories or dreams related to the event, distressing thoughts, and physical signs of stress. Just because you have a dissociative disorder or that you deal with any type of mental disorder, that doesn't mean you have to suffer, because there are resources out there and there is help out there for you, and you deserve the help. According to the Mayo Clinic, dissociative disorder treatment may vary based on the type of disorder you have, but generally it includes psychotherapy and medication. The Mayo Clinic continues to state, psychotherapy is the primary treatment for dissociative disorders. This form of therapy, also known as talk therapy, counseling, or psychosocial therapy, involves talking about your disorder and related issues with a mental health professional. I've personally done some EMDR before. Bear with me while I read out what EMDR stands for, because I have audio processing issues and I have an issue with pronouncing words. I'm sure you could tell by my videos. EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. There we go. EMDR was defined and founded by Francine Shapiro. EMDR can only be practiced by therapists who are certified, and you should really get to know your therapist and get comfortable with them before starting EMDR. And I will say, it took me over 3.5 years to start EMDR with my previous therapist, because she didn't want to start the therapy because I was living with my primary abuser. So she was really looking out for me. And EMDR has come a long way over the last several years. Even though there are no medications for dissociative disorders specifically, there are medications that can be used to treat the comorbid disorders alongside the dissociative disorders, which can include antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication, and also antipsychotic medication. I do have to say, if you're on an antipsychotic, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are experiencing psychosis when it comes to these dissociative disorders. Antipsychotics aren't solely to treat psychosis, just like antidepressants and other medications have multiple benefits. Only you and your medical provider knows what's best for you. But I didn't want people confused and thinking when you dissociate, you're experiencing psychosis, since people often link dissociative identity disorder and schizophrenia together when they are not the same thing. I've had so many doctors tell me, oh, I don't know why you have dissociative identity disorder and schizoaffective when they're the same thing, and it's not the same thing. So there you have it, a brief overview of what dissociative disorders are and kind of tidbits about them. And again, I want to say that, I'm not a medical doctor. These are just stuff that I'm interested in, and I have DID, so it's interesting to me to talk about, and I would like to, share information for what I can and my experience. Again, please seek professional help if you suspect that you have any disorder, really, but especially trauma disorders like DID. You really need to sit down with a professional and get professional help, and not try to dig into the nooks and crannies of your trauma, because you will end up most likely re-traumatizing yourself and causing more harm than good. So please, if you suspect that you have any of these disorders or any disorder in general, to please seek help if you can or have the means to. I know that the healthcare, I can only speak for America. In America, absolutely sucks. But there should, well, I will only speak for North Carolina. There, in Western North Carolina, there are state funding clinics and stuff. That's what I was going to. And a lot of places here are state funded, typically. So try to reach out to a resource and see if they do have state funding. And maybe you can get the help that way. And you just really have to be careful for what you go digging through, because you never know what you're going to find. So yeah, I hope you don't mind this voiceover. I'm really nervous, but I've tried so hard. It's been like 3 days of me recording this with an ear infection and sinus infection, but I really wanted to get a video out, and this is something that I really love talking about. I really love talking about mental health and like the nooks and crannies and stuff like that, in the tidbits. But I hope that you know that you are very much loved and you are very much valid, and I hope you keep on keeping on.